Welcome to this deep dive into the world of Jordan Peterson. You've shared some really fascinating material with us, excerpts from 12 Rules for Life, and even the foreword by Norman Doidge. So we're going to kind of unpack some of Peterson's most compelling ideas, see how they fit in with psychology and even, evolution, and most importantly, try to figure out how they might apply to your life.
Yeah, it's a real journey, through
Right.
human behavior and this search for meaning.
Okay, so Peterson, he starts with a pretty unexpected comparison.
Right.
Lobsters and humans.
Lobsters and humans.
I mean, who would have thought?
Yeah.
But he draws this intriguing parallel between serotonin and dominance hierarchies. And this exists in both species.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating because lobsters have this relatively simple nervous system, right, that scientists can map out in detail. And this actually allows them to study how serotonin directly affects behavior in a way that wouldn't be possible with more complex creatures, like us.
So by understanding lobsters, we can learn something about ourselves.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
And one of the key takeaways here is that posture and dominance aren't just about physical appearance, right? They directly impact our serotonin levels, which can then affect everything from our stress response and confidence levels to even our lifespan, just like with lobsters. Higher serotonin often means better outcomes.
So it's like that saying, fake it till you make it, actually has some scientific backing.
In a way, yes. Peterson argues that by consciously adopting a more dominant posture, shoulders back, shin up, we can actually influence our internal chemistry and, in turn, our overall well-being.
Wow. That's incredible. It really makes you reconsider how much control we have over our own state of mind.
Absolutely. And this ties into a larger idea that Peterson explores, the concept of chaos and order as these fundamental forces that shape our lives. Think of it this way. Order is the known, the familiar, the things we've mastered. Chaos represents the unknown, the unpredictable, the things that challenge us. We need both of these forces for a truly meaningful life.
It's like starting a new job. It's exciting, but also completely chaotic at first. Then as you learn the ropes and build your skills, you start to create order within that chaos.
That's a perfect example. And what's fascinating is that this understanding of chaos and order isn't limited to any one culture or time period. Peterson points out that even Wall Street bankers and Kalahari Bushmen, despite their wildly different lives, share similar stories and myths about navigating these forces.
It seems like a universal human experience then, this dance between chaos and order.
Exactly. Now, how does this all connect to Peterson's first few rules for life? Let's start with stand up straight with your shoulders back. This rule seems simple on the surface,
Yeah.
but Peterson gives it a much deeper meaning.
So it's more than just good posture advice.
Much more, Peterson argues that standing up straight is about accepting what he calls the burden of being, the responsibility that comes with being human. It's about confronting the chaos in our lives rather than shrinking back from it.
So if we connect this back to the serotonin link, standing tall is not just about looking confident, but about cultivating a sense of inner strength and resilience.
Precisely. It's a physical manifestation of a psychological state. And this ties directly into his next rule. Make friends with people who want the best for you. He's saying that the people we surround ourselves with have a huge impact on our ability to face those challenges and grow.
We've all had those friends who bring us down or hold us back.
Yeah.
Peterson is saying we need to choose friends who challenge us, who push us to be better versions of ourselves.
Exactly. He even shares a personal story about confronting a friend who was engaged in self-destructive behavior. It wasn't easy, but he chose to stand up for what he believed was right, even if it meant risking the friendship.
It's a great reminder that true friends support our growth, even when it's uncomfortable.
Yes, it's about choosing relationships that align with our values and aspirations.
Now, Peterson takes a fascinating turn when he brings in the story of the Garden of Eden. He's not talking about it as literal truth, but as a powerful psychological archetype.
Right. He uses the serpent as a symbol for the temptation of expediency, of choosing immediate gratification over long-term goals. It's that voice in our heads that says, take the easy way out, even if it leads us away from what we truly value.
It makes me think of those times when I've chosen to stay in my comfort zone, instead of pursuing something that scared me, but also excited me. It's like that serpent whispering in my ear, just stay here, it's safe.
Exactly. And this ties back to the idea of making friends who want the best for us. Those friends can help us resist the serpent's whispers, to choose the path of growth, even when it's challenging.
So it's about having people in our lives who remind us of our potential and encourage us to strive for something more.
Precisely. And this leads us to a somewhat darker aspect of Peterson's thinking, his view of human nature. He doesn't shy away from the fact that we all have a capacity for darkness. He uses the story of Cain and Abel to explore this idea of self-deception and the shadow self.
Ooh, this is where things get really interesting, and maybe a little uncomfortable.
He's saying that self-consciousness, which separates us from animals, gave us the ability to reflect on ourselves, to be aware of our limitations. But it also gave us the ability to deceive ourselves and others.
And he has that chilling line, "You're bad enough as other people know you, but only you know the full range of your secret transgressions." Yikes.
That's Peterson's point. We all have a capacity for darkness. And acknowledging that is the first step toward confronting it. It's about recognizing that we are capable of both great good and great evil.
So how do we navigate this complex reality? How do we deal with the shadow self without falling into despair?
This is where Peterson's emphasis on taking responsibility comes in. He sees the temptation to blame the world for our problems, to wallow in resentment, as a dangerous path that can lead to nihilism, the belief that life has no meaning.
It's that feeling of helplessness, like nothing we do matters.
Exactly. And Peterson offers a powerful antidote. Orient yourself properly. Then and only then, concentrate on the day. Set your sights at the good, the beautiful, and the true. It's about finding something to strive for, something that gives our lives purpose and direction.
So instead of getting lost in the chaos, we need to create our own order, our own sense of meaning.
Yes, and that starts with taking responsibility for our own lives, for our choices and actions. It's about choosing to focus on the good, the beautiful, and the true, even in the midst of suffering and darkness.
And again, we see that idea of standing up straight come into play. But this time, metaphorically, it's about standing tall in the face of our own flaws and imperfections, about taking ownership of our lives.
Absolutely. It's about choosing to be active participants in our own becoming, rather than passive victims of circumstance. And speaking of being active participants, there's one rule that really emphasizes a different way of interacting with the world. Assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't.
Okay, that one is a challenge, especially in today's world where everyone seems to have an opinion they need to broadcast. It seems like true listening is becoming a lost art.
Peterson would agree with you there. He argues that true listening, without judgment or interruption, is incredibly rare and requires a lot of courage. It forces us to confront different perspectives and potentially challenge our own closely held beliefs.
He even tells a story about working with a paranoid client and how simply listening with genuine curiosity and empathy helped to build trust and understanding.
It's a powerful example of how listening can be transformative, not just for the person being heard, but also for the listener. It opens us up to new possibilities and helps us to see the world through different lenses.
It makes you realize how often we're just waiting for our turn to talk, instead of truly paying attention to what the other person is saying.
Exactly. And this idea of listening leads nicely into another fascinating aspect of Peterson's work, his exploration of group identity and our tendency to form us versus them dynamics. He references a psychological experiment called the minimal group paradigm to illustrate this point.
I'm all ears. Tell me more about this experiment.
Okay, so Henri Torchfell, the researcher who conducted this experiment, showed that humans readily form groups, even based on completely arbitrary distinctions. Imagine being assigned to a group based on a coin flip. Heads, you're in group A, tails, you're in group B. Even in this scenario, people tend to favor their in-group, even if there's no logical reason to.
So we're hardwired to create divisions, even when those divisions are based on nothing.
It seems, so Peterson even uses a humorous example, our preference for cats or dogs, to illustrate this point.
So whether we're talking about serious social issues or something as lighthearted as pet preferences, this tendency to divide ourselves into groups seems to be deeply ingrained in our psychology.
It's a fascinating insight, and it makes you wonder how much of our social behavior is driven by this in-group bias versus a genuine sense of shared values and goals.
It's a lot to think about, and we've only just begun to scratch the surface of what you've shared with us. There's so much more to explore.
Absolutely. This deep dive has just begun.
It really does make you think about how this in-group bias plays out in the real world, especially in areas like politics and social conflicts.
Yeah, definitely. And it really highlights the importance of being aware of our own biases and, actively seeking out diverse perspectives. But let's kind of shift gears for a moment and dive into another area where Peterson has generated a lot of discussion, his views on discipline and parenting.
This is definitely a topic that gets a lot of attention and sometimes controversy. What are some of the key takeaways from his work in this area?
Well, one of the core ideas is that children need structure and boundaries, not just unconditional freedom and self-expression. He argues that parents have a duty to prepare their children for the real world, with all its complexities and challenges.
He even compares raising children to training a dog, saying that both require clear expectations and consistent consequences. And he doesn't shy away from discussing physical punishment, which obviously sparks a lot of debate. What's his stance on that?
Peterson's view on physical punishment is nuanced. He acknowledges the potential for abuse, but argues that there are situations where a measured and controlled physical response can be the most effective way to stop a young child from engaging in dangerous behavior.
He gives the example of a child running toward a busy street, saying that a quick swat might be the only thing that prevents a tragedy. But he also emphasizes that this should always be a last resort, not the go-to method of discipline.
Exactly. The goal is to guide children toward becoming responsible and well-adjusted individuals who can navigate the world successfully. It's about socializing them, not just protecting them from discomfort or unpleasantness.
It makes me think of that saying, prepare the child for the road, not the road for the child.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just about setting limits and enforcing consequences. Peterson also talks about the importance of engaging with children in a playful and creative way, using humor and imagination to make learning enjoyable. He shares an anecdote about his own son refusing to eat, and how he used a combination of persistence and playfulness to get him to take a bite. It's about finding that balance between firmness and warmth.
It's interesting how these ideas about discipline could apply to adults as well. We all need some structure and accountability in our lives to thrive, even if it doesn't come in the form of parental rules.
Absolutely. It's about setting personal goals, holding ourselves to a certain standard, and being willing to learn from our mistakes.
So good discipline isn't about punishment. It's about growth.
Exactly. Now let's move into an area that might seem lighter on the surface, but actually reveals a lot about human nature, our tendency to lie, even in seemingly small ways.
We've all been there. Those little white lies we tell to avoid awkwardness or to protect someone's feelings. But Peterson takes a pretty strong stance on this, right?
He does. He argues that even those seemingly harmless white lies can erode trust and contribute to a sense of meaninglessness and nihilism in our lives. He sees truthfulness as essential for personal integrity and a healthy society.
So connecting this back to what we were discussing earlier about the shadow self and self-deception,
Yeah.
could it be that those little white lies were actually a way of avoiding confronting a truth about ourselves that we'd rather not face?
That's a very insightful connection. And it highlights the importance of being honest with ourselves. Even when it's uncomfortable, Peterson believes that living in accordance with our values, even when it's inconvenient, is the foundation of a truly meaningful life.
It's that classic struggle between choosing the easy path and the right path, even when the right path feels much harder.
Precisely. And this idea of choosing the harder path ties into Peterson's concept of sacrifice. He uses this term not in a religious sense, but as a metaphor for delaying gratification and working towards something greater than ourselves.
So it's about recognizing that true fulfillment often comes from pursuing what is meaningful, not just what is pleasurable in the moment.
Exactly. And speaking of pursuing what is meaningful, I think it's worth revisiting Peterson's emphasis on the importance of listening. It's such a simple act, yet it can be incredibly challenging, especially when we're interacting with people who hold different views than our own.
It's so easy to fall into the trap of just waiting for our turn to speak, instead of really absorbing what the other person is saying.
Peterson would say that true listening, the kind that involves genuinely trying to understand another person's perspective, is a form of courage. It requires us to be open to being challenged and to potentially changing our own minds.
He talks about different types of conversations, some dominated by dominance hierarchies where people are constantly trying to one-up each other, and others that are focused on genuine exchange and exploration of ideas. I'm guessing he favors the latter.
Absolutely. He sees those conversations that are rooted in curiosity and a desire to learn as being much more enriching and productive. And he even suggests that humor, when done well, can be a sign of intelligence and social competence. He gives some interesting examples of witty banter among working-class men, suggesting that this type of humor can be a way of building camaraderie and testing character.
It's a reminder that communication is a multifaceted thing. Sometimes it's about connection, sometimes it's about competition, and sometimes it's just pure entertainment.
Speaking of entertainment, Peterson uses a really interesting example from popular culture to illustrate his point about the importance of limitations, the decline of the Superman franchise in the 1980s.
I remember those movies. What's his take on that?
He argues that Superman became too powerful, too invincible, and as a result, he lost his appeal as a hero. There was no real challenge, no sense of vulnerability, which made it harder to connect with him on an emotional level.
It's like that idea that we need something to strive against, something to overcome. Without obstacles, there's no growth. no sense of accomplishment.
Exactly. And Peterson connects this idea of limitations to a much larger philosophical question, the nature of being itself. He even references the German philosopher Goethe and his famous work Faust, which explores this theme of striving and the human desire to transcend our limits.
Whoa, we're getting it
Uh,
deep here. So Peterson isn't just offering self-help advice. He's grappling with some of the biggest questions of human existence.
he is. He's wrestling with the meaning of life, the nature of good and evil, and the inevitability of suffering. And while he doesn't offer easy answers, he encourages us to engage with these questions honestly and courageously.
It's a lot to take in. But even with all this heavy philosophy, Peterson always brings it back to concrete actions, things we can do in our everyday lives to make a difference. And that brings us to his personal experiences, particularly his daughter's struggle with a debilitating illness. He's incredibly open about the pain and challenges they both faced.
This is where Peterson's ideas become deeply personal and poignant. He's not just talking about these concepts in the abstract, he's lived them. And he shares what he learned from those experiences about navigating suffering and finding meaning amidst adversity.
It must have been incredibly difficult to go through that, both for him and his daughter. What insights did he glean from that experience?
He talks about the importance of finding strength and purpose, even when it feels impossible. It's about focusing on what we can control, finding small moments of joy in the present, and striving to make the world a better place, even in the face of immense pain. He shares some specific questions he asked himself during that time, questions about how to be the best husband, father, and son he could be, even amidst unimaginable suffering.
Those questions provide a framework for how to live our values,
Yeah.
even when we're feeling overwhelmed and lost. It's about taking action, even small actions that align with who we want to be.
Exactly. And he emphasizes the importance of honesty, not just with others, but also with ourselves. He sees this as a key part of overcoming nihilism and finding meaning in life. It's about facing the truth, even when it's painful, and taking responsibility for our choices and actions.
So it's not about avoiding pain. It's about finding meaning and purpose in the midst of the inevitable suffering that life throws our way.
Yes. And this leads to a very powerful conclusion, a call to action for all of us. Peterson asks us to consider what small steps we can take today to align our actions with our desired future selves.
It's not about finding a magic formula or a quick fix. It's about engaging with the world honestly, finding meaning in our struggles and striving to make things better, even in small ways.
It's a call to embrace the burden of being, to find the courage to face the unknown and to choose the path of growth, even when it's difficult.
It's a lot to ponder for sure. And it sounds like we're approaching the end of our deep dive. But before we wrap up, I'm curious to hear more about Peterson's thoughts on ennobling lies. It sounds like a paradox. What does he mean by that?
It's definitely a thought-provoking concept. He's referring to beliefs that might sound appealing or even morally righteous, but that are ultimately based on a distortion of reality.
Can you give us an example?
He's critical of certain aspects of modern social justice movements, arguing that they sometimes rely on a simplistic or even inaccurate view of power dynamics and group identity. He doesn't deny the existence of injustice or oppression, but challenges the idea that all inequality is the result of systemic power structures. He argues that individual choice and responsibility also play a significant role.
So it's not about denying the reality of systemic issues, but about recognizing that the solutions aren't always straightforward and that individual actions matter.
Exactly. And he points out that attempts to engineer complete equality of outcomes can sometimes lead to unintended consequences, even new forms of injustice.
It's a reminder that the world is complex and that even well-intentioned actions can have unforeseen ripple effects.
He advocates for a more nuanced and balanced understanding of these issues, one that recognizes both the systemic and individual factors at play.
It's a call for critical thinking, questioning assumptions, and being open to different perspectives. And it's a good reminder to, approach these complex issues with humility and a willingness to learn. But okay, before we wrap up, I have to ask about one last thing that really caught my attention. Peterson's idea of finding things to pet. It sounds random, but I have a feeling there's more to it than meets the eye.
Yeah, you're right, there is. It might seem like a quirky aside, but it actually speaks to a very profound aspect of Peterson's philosophy. He believes that even small acts of kindness and connection can have a ripple effect, bringing more beauty and meaning into our lives and the lives of others.
So something as simple as petting a dog can actually be a meaningful act.
Absolutely. Think about it. When you pet a dog, even a stranger's dog on the street, you're creating a moment of shared joy and connection. You're acknowledging the inherent worth of that creature and, in a way, affirming your own shared humanity.
It's like a little reminder that we're all connected even in the midst of our busy, often chaotic lives.
Exactly. And Peterson connects us to the larger idea of finding meaning in the everyday, even in the midst of suffering. It's about cultivating a sense of gratitude for the simple things, for the beauty that surrounds us, even in the most unexpected places.
It's about, shifting our perspective, choosing to focus on the good instead of getting bogged down by the negative. Does he have any personal stories that relate to this idea?
He does. He talks about his own dog, a teacup poodle named Sicko, and the unique personality quirks that make him such a beloved companion. It's a heartwarming story that highlights the idea that each creature, human or animal, has its own intrinsic value and is worthy of love and attention.
It's a beautiful reminder to appreciate the small things in life, the things that bring us joy and connect us to something larger than ourselves. And I think that's a perfect note to end on. This deep dive has taken us on quite a journey through the ideas of Jordan Peterson. We've explored everything from lobsters and dominance hierarchies to chaos and order truth, and sacrificed the nature of good and evil and the importance of listening, learning, and even petting dogs.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating exploration of a thinker who challenges us to confront the complexities of life with courage, honesty, and a willingness to grow.
And now we're left with one final provocative question for you to ponder. If Peterson is right and being requires becoming, what is one small step you could take today to align your actions with your desired future self?
It's a question worth reflecting on. What small change can you make? What action can you take that will move you closer to the person you want to be?
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Jordan Peterson. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep striving to make your life and the world a little bit better.
Did you get any of that?